"Can I play for food?" They mocked Black Girl until she revealed she's a piano prodigy. They ridiculed the homeless girl when she asked, "Am I able to perform in exchange for food?" unaware of the fact that she was a piano virtuoso. Before continuing, I want to invite you to like the video and leave a comment from where you are watching this beautiful story. Is it possible for me to play in order to get food? The lobby of the Continental Hotel was filled with sophisticated talks, but the soft voice of the 12-year-old girl rang out, slicing through them like a keen blade. When a small black girl had the audacity to interrupt the most elite charity cocktail party in the city, people immediately stopped chatting and turned their attention to her. Amelia Washington was standing at the entrance to the main hall, her big, optimistic eyes fixed on the Steinway grand piano that gleamed beneath the crystal chandeliers. She was surrounded by luxury dresses and tailored suits, and the contrast between them and her own modest, slightly loose attire was quite stark. As if it were a protective barrier, she held a well-used backpack close to her chest. "How was that child able to get into this place?" a woman with platinum hair murmured, holding her champagne glass tightly in her grasp. "Where is the security?" Amelia had spent the past week sleeping in a variety of different shelters. As a result, she was well aware of the irony that the event was a banquet being held to collect funds for disadvantaged youngsters. When she was passing by the entrance to the hotel earlier, she overheard some people talking about the event, and something within her prompted her to try to get inside. Victoria Sterling, the organizer of the event and the heiress to a family fortune, approached with measured steps. She was the very embodiment of the upper crust of the city's social scene. She was 45 years old, well-educated, sophisticated, and completely sure that her morals were superior to those of other people. "This is not a place for someone like you," she replied with a patronizing smile. "Just 2 blocks away from this location is a McDonald's." "I just wanted to play," Amelia repeated, her voice taking on an unexpected tone of determination. "In return for a dish of food, just a single song is all I ask." The crowd started to laugh, and the sound rippled through them. A man wearing a navy blue suit laughed out loud and said, "She believes she has the ability to play the piano. It's quite possible that she doesn't even know which key is a C." Another woman shook her head with a fake expression of sadness and commented, "It's adorable how imaginative these children are." After watching a movie, people believe that they are capable of doing anything. On the other hand, Amelia refused to look away. There was a calm nobility and a silent assurance in his posture that made it seem as though he was out of place in his current situation. It was as if he knew something that no one else in the room was aware of. The scenario was observed from the back of the hall by Dr. Robert Chun, a distinguished pianist and one of the adjudicators for national contests. He had observed that the girl's gaze remained focused on the piano, with a reverence that he had scarcely witnessed. Even among students who were further along in their musical studies, there was familiarity there, and they recognized each other. Dr. Chun approached Victoria. "Perhaps it would be a good idea to let her play. In the end, aren't we here to support individuals who are gifted and young?" A giggle escaped Victoria's lips. It was cold and brittle, like the tinkling of glass. "Please have a look at her, Robert. Children like this lack access to educational opportunities in the field of music. It is not possible." None of them were aware of the fact that Amelia had spent the first 8 years of her life in a household where music was as vital as breathing. Her grandmother, who was a classical pianist and had never received the accolades that she deserved on account of the color of her skin, was her first and only teacher. After the passing of her grandmother, Amelia became a ward of the state As a result of her experience in the foster care system, she retained not only the anguish that accompanies the death of a loved one, but also a skill that she herself did not have a complete understanding of. Amelia held her ground with unwavering resolve in the face of the scornful gazes of everyone around her, demonstrating the strength that she had developed from the hardships that she had overcome in the past, without even thinking about it. His fingers moved as though they were playing a melody on an imaginary instrument, a habit that he had formed to help himself remain calm during the most trying times. If you are enjoying this story of overcoming adversity and justice, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. This will allow you to find out how a simple, innocent question was about to silence a room full of prejudice and reveal a talent that would redefine everything those people thought they knew about human potential. Putting her hands across her chest, Victoria Sterling cackled in a dramatic fashion, as though she had just heard the most preposterous joke imaginable. "All right, my dear," she remarked with a tone that was thoroughly imbued with patronizing sentiments. "Given your insistence, let's strike a deal of some kind. You are able to participate in this activity, but it will come with a few strings attached." The audience advanced, getting a sense of the odor of a vicious spectacle that was on the verge of materializing. When Victoria had the opportunity to showcase her moral superiority to other members of high society, she reveled in the adoration and attention that she received. Victoria raised a finger that had been flawlessly groomed and declared the first condition. "There is only going to be one song performed, and we will get to decide what it is. If he can get himself together and put together a solid performance, I will treat him to a whole dinner and pay for it myself as the second condition." But she paused in a very dramatic manner and continued by saying that the moment he fails in a big way, as we know he will leave this place without delay and never again be a nuisance to respectable people. An older woman who was at the back of the group mumbled, "How cruel," but her voice was drowned out by the other guests' appreciative laughing. Amelia did not move a single muscle, his gaze focused on the piano in front of him. Memories from the past were mixing with the present moment, and something was going on in her mind. She was able to nearly hear the gentle voice of his grandma, "Betty, my dearest, when people attempt to make you feel insignificant, let the music do the talking for you. Music is honest and does not have any preconceived notions." In a straightforward and unwavering tone, Amelia responded, "I accept that." Dr. Chin was captivated as he watched. He was greatly intrigued by the way that the girl held her body and by the manner in which she stared at the instrument. He had an instinct for identifying genuine talent, which he had gained over the course of 30 years of assessing pianists. This child possessed a quality that caused his expert senses to quiver. "That's ideal." Clapping her hands, Victoria expressed her excitement. Finally, about the music, she glanced around, trying for the alternative that would be the most difficult and humiliating. Her gaze landed on James Morrison, an unremarkable pianist who performed in bars around the neighborhood. "James, dear, what would be a good artwork for our little artist to create?" James wore a smile that suggested that he was up to no good. "What do you think of Für Elise by Beethoven? Every single person who has ever played a single note on a piano in the course of their lives has attempted to perform that particular piece of music. She ought to be capable of doing that if she truly have any knowledge about the subject." The crowd erupted in laughter as a result of the decision that was made, while the general public thought Für Elise to be a beginner's work. In reality, performing the piece flawlessly needed a highly developed technique and many years of practice. Amelia was only aware of the basics, which made this trap ideal. If she were to attempt to play, she would fail in a spectacular fashion. Starting would not be possible for him if he did not know anything. Victoria applauded, It was a wonderful decision, she thought, a song that is familiar to any child that has ever taken piano lessons. There is no such thing as failure if you do not have any excuses, Amelia acknowledged and made her way over to the piano. Each step appeared to be filled with a calm resolve, which caused some individuals who were sitting at the back of the hall to feel curiously uneasy. In the scene, something did not feel right. It is not right for a child of 12 years of age to maintain such self-respect in the face of such disgrace. She settled herself into the piano bench and positioned it at the ideal height with precise, familiar movements, and at that moment Dr. Chun felt a chill run down her spine. Those movements did not appear to come from a novice. Victoria smirked at the guests who were closest to her and said, "Look at that. She does not even know the appropriate way to sit on the bench. It is quite likely that she has never had the opportunity to view an actual piano before." Dr. Chun, on the other hand, has observed the exact opposite of that. The method in which Amelia adjusted the bench, her erect posture, and the manner in which Amelia's hands lingered over the keys in a perfect classical position. It took years for people to learn how to do these things correctly. Amelia was overwhelmed by the torrent of memories that surged through her consciousness. Betty Washington, her mother, and her grandmother were among the first African-American pianists to attempt to get admission to the city's conservatory in the 1960s. The prejudice of the era kept her from gaining access to opportunities, in spite of the fact that she possessed evident talent. In her little home, Betty converted her ancient upright piano into a gateway to the world of classical music. In this way, she taught children from the community and turned her passion into a career. Amelia. Betty would explain as she guided her granddaughter's little fingers over the keys. Music is her universal language. People listen with their souls rather than their eyes when you perform from the heart. Amelia had dedicated countless hours to playing that piano, not only gaining the technique, but also acquiring the deep understanding of music that only a real master can impart. During the lonely evenings that she spent in shelters, music was the only thing that stayed constant for Amelia after she was separated from all she knew, including her best friend, Betty, who passed away. Victoria replied that they were waiting as she drummed her fingers impatiently. "Or have you abandoned your goals before you've even set out to achieve them?" Placing her hands on the keys, Amelia inhaled a long breath before she began to play. The touch gave the impression that an electric current was coursing through the body. After having a long period of time in which he did not play a real instrument, he felt as though he had found a missing piece of her soul once more when he touched the keys with his fingers. A number of people looked up in astonishment when the first note resonated through the hall with a crystalline purity that caused them to glance up. They were taken aback by the sound because it was not the tentative, amateurish sound that they had anticipated. It was a note that was played with the self-assurance of someone who is extremely familiar with every aspect of the instrument. Her professional curiosity well awakened, Dr. Chun approached quietly and unobtrusively. The very first note was played with great skill, a precise attack, perfect sustain, and a controlled tone. These were details that could only be achieved via years of dedicated instruction. "What a coincidence," Victoria remarked. But her voice lacked some of the conviction that it had possessed previously. Each note that came from Amelia's fingers seemed like a minor miracle as she began to play the main theme of Für Elise. There was not a single moment of hesitation, nor was there any technical fault. The piano and the woman seemed to be two halves of a same creature, and the music erupted from them naturally. However, there was another element that left Dr. Chun utterly speechless. There was a sense of emotional maturity in the interpretation, the manner in which she expressed the melodic passages, the way she manipulated the dynamics, and the way in which she permitted the silence between the notes to speak, with the same eloquence as the music itself, were all hallmarks of a mature artist. They were not the product of an inexperienced youngster. The entire hall had become utterly silent. The visitors held their champagne glasses in a state of immobility. The waiters were no longer ambulatory, and even the conversations came to a halt. That little figure at the piano, producing music of stunning and unanticipated beauty, charmed everyone who was there. Victoria experienced an increasingly uncomfortable feeling in her stomach. This was not turning out to be the case at all. The public humiliation that she had meticulously arranged was metamorphosing into something that was quite different. It had become something that was beyond his control. While Amelia was playing, the music that surged through her like a force of nature left everyone who was there with the same question in their minds. What mysteries did this young woman hold, and what revelations was her music about to disclose? Dr. Chun's heart started to speed as Amelia made her way through the most intricate portions of Für Elise. He had fine-tuned his instincts over the course of 40 years by analyzing musical aptitude, and what he was witnessing went against all common sense. Far from being merely adequate, the young woman's approach was truly remarkable. The section of the descending arpeggio, which confounded even expert students, flowed from her fingers as effortlessly as crystal pure water. Every note had weight and purpose, and every silence was filled with a sophisticated melody. With the precision of a skilled concert pianist, she operated the sustain pedal, and Dr. Chun watched with a sense of wonder. Moving closer to the keyboard, he mumbled to himself, "This is impossible, I tell you." Victoria was aware of the shift in the environment around her, and as a result, she perceived the first signs of alarm ringing in her mind. The discussions had come to a complete standstill. The waiters had even ceased serving, captivated by the music that had transformed the auditorium into an impromptu performance hall. In a desperate attempt to re-establish control of the narrative, Victoria loudly proclaimed to the other people there she must have memorized this song from some YouTube video. Children these days will reproduce everything they see on the internet without question. However, his reasoning became less and less convincing with each passing moment. Amelia's actions were not mimicry, rather, they were a genuine interpretation that was packed with an emotional knowledge that could only come from years of rigorous study and, more importantly, experience. She had seen a great number of child prodigies throughout the course of her profession, ranging from 5-year-olds who could play Mozart to teenagers who could grasp Rachmaninoff. In particular, she had rarely encountered such a mix of flawless technique and musical maturity in someone so young, especially in circumstances such as these. The point in the composition at which the primary melody makes its reappearance with invigorated energy following the technically challenging segments is where Amelia arrived. Her fingers moved across the keys with a familiarity that suggested that she had practiced for hundreds, if not thousands, of hours. That degree of familiarity with the instrument was something that could not be feigned in the slightest, something akin to a subterranean river coursed through the music, and that something was memories. Betty, Amelia's grandma, had a voice that reverberated through the years, and Amelia could hear it. "My beloved, music is not a matter of playing the correct notes. It's related to recounting a story that only you are able to relate." Betty Washington was more than just a teacher. She was a visionary who could see into the future by looking at the delicate fingers of her granddaughter. She grew up during a period in which African-American pianists were routinely prohibited from attending famous conservatories and concert halls. She was born in the year 1940. Her solution was to transform his own residence into a shrine of music. Children from the community found that classical music belonged to them as well. When Betty was adjusting Amelia's posture on the piano bench, she would often comment that the world will try to convince you that certain things are out of reach for individuals like us. There are no boundaries that music cannot overcome. It is ignorant of all colors and all forms of poverty. It is simply aware of truth. Amelia was able to immerse herself in not just technique, but also musical philosophy for a period of 8 wonderful years. Betty was a teacher who instructed her that every individual composer had a language of his own. Chopin talked about yearning, Beethoven talked about conflict and victory, and Mozart talked about glass and happiness. What is more important is that she discovered that her musical voice was just as valuable. Amelia did not just lose her grandma when Betty passed quite unexpectedly from a heart attack. She lost her entire universe. The foster care system removed her from music, from the piano, and from anything else that gave her life purpose. For the span of 4 years, she only carried music in her thoughts, playing keyboards that were imagined in the freezing dormitories of shelters. However, it all came flooding back in this bizarre scene at the Hotel Continental. Betty's kind words of encouragement and every kind correction she gave poured through her hands as if no time had ever passed, as if they were still part of every lesson. Amelia played the last few notes of the composition, and Dr. Chun observed her with a look of amazement on his face. Her ability to regulate the dynamics, beginning with a pianissimo and then developing to a powerful forte before returning to the gentle whisper of the opening, demonstrated a musical comprehension that had taken decades to perfect. "Would you please let me know if you're seeing this as well?" he whispered to his colleague, who was sitting next to him and was a professor of piano at the local university. "This child possesses more than just talent. She is a force to be reckoned with." The earth trembled beneath Victoria Sterling's feet, and she could sense it moving. Her meticulously prepared scheme to humiliate a defenseless child was turning into the exact reverse of what she had intended. Amelia was compelling everyone to examine the most fundamental assumptions that they held regarding class, ethnicity, and merit instead of validating her preconceived notions. Victoria whispered to her closest pals, "It can't be anything else. It must be a trick." Learning to play the piano is not something that anyone does all of a sudden, without warning. She must have been taking pricey private lessons somewhere without anyone knowing about them. Victoria was aware that her comments were coming off as more and more desperate, even as she was saying them. The level of greatness that the child before her was exhibiting was something that no amount of money could purchase. She was playing with soul, with lived history, and with a profundity that emanated from realms that luxury could never reach. The last chords of Für Elise were performed by Amelia with such delicacy that it rendered several of the people in the audience breathless. She left her hands hovering above the keys for a brief moment after the final echo had faded into the complete quiet of the room. For a time, it was as though she was hesitant to sever the enchanting bond that existed between her and the piano. After that, she twisted around on the bench gradually until she was facing the crowd, who were all keeping quiet. The bashful child who had previously pleaded for food was no longer in evidence. The spot that he had previously occupied was now taken by a young artist who had just established his position in the world by way of the global language of music. Dr. Chun was the first person to break the quiet, her hands coming together in a gesture of respectful applause that reverberated across the auditorium like distant thunder. The Continental Hotel was filled with a palpable buzz of appreciation after others gradually joined in. An increasing sense of alarm came over Victoria as she gazed about her. She had intended to publicly humiliate her, but her efforts had backfired and had resulted in a celebration of the very skill that she had originally tried to discredit. Even worse, she could see in the eyes of the other visitors a query that made her feel uneasy. If they were so incorrect about this child, what else were they wrong about? Sitting quietly, Amelia let the applause cascade over her like a refreshing shower after an extended period of dryness. However, there was a change going on in her. She was not becoming arrogant, but she was coming to a deeper understanding of her own abilities. Her argument had been substantiated, but this was just the first step in the process. Her look a mixture of adoration and professional interest. Dr. Chun approached the piano. "Child," he asked softly, "may I inquire as to where you received your education? His instructor must be someone quite exceptional." For a minute, Amelia stared right into his eyes, and she gave free rein to all the anguish she had been feeling over the past 4 years, letting it pour out through her gaze. She responded in a straightforward manner that it was her grandma who had instructed her. She remarked that music was the one thing that nobody could take away from me. The solution came to Dr. Chun suddenly, like a flash of lightning. A granny rather than a costly conservatory. Love within the family unit is not a privilege that can be bought. Ability is nurtured within the household rather than at prestigious educational institutions. A 12-year-old girl had just redefined her expectations of grandeur, and all of the things that he believed about how musical excellence was generated were being called into question as a result. Amelia was aware that she had gone too far when the hall was still reverberating with reluctant appreciation. She was no longer able to put up the pretense of being merely a lost youngster who was asking for food. She had made excessive promises and disclosures through her music. In the moment when all eyes were on her and the atmosphere was thick with expectation, she had to make a decision about how far she was willing to take that revelation and whether she was prepared to show these privileged people what a worthless child could truly do when music spoke through her soul with the power of generations of dreams that had been denied. With cautious movements, as though approaching something that was hallowed, Dr. Chun drew near to the piano. "I have to pose a question to you," he began, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. "It is something that is very important. I'm not able to share my real name, but I can tell you that my name is Assistant." Amelia Washington responded, keeping the same composed demeanor that she had exhibited throughout the course of the evening. Dr. Chun was struck by the name as if he had been hit by lightning. He took a step back, and his eyes became wide. "Washington State. Betty Washington Gray." "Are you the granddaughter of Betty Washington by any chance?" Dr. Chun buried his face with his hands, and Amelia nodded in silence in response. "My God," he said in a low voice. "One of the finest pianists that this nation has ever produced was Betty Washington. She should have performed at the world's most prestigious conservatories, but her voice cracked, weighed down by the burden of ancient suffering." As Victoria observed the interaction, her feelings of discomfort grew more intense. "Robert, could you perhaps clarify what you're referring to here? Betty Washington was the daughter of George Washington and Martha Washington. She was born in 1738 and died in 1797. She gave her a look that was a mixture of astonishment and revulsion before turning away. Betty Washington was a musical legend, and her name was Victoria. Her remarkable skill in music was the reason that she was kept out of music conservatories and performance halls on a regular basis due to the hue of her skin. She trained scores of professional musicians, and she became one of the most well-respected private music teachers in the nation. A few members of the crowd mumbled amongst themselves, and some of them were familiar with the moniker because of their own experiences with music. Betty Washington was the subject of hushed conversation in musical circles because of her ability to take any committed student and turn them into an excellent musician. "That was many years ago," Victoria remarked, and her voice was taking on a more and more defensive tone. Even if that story is accurate, it does not alter the reality that she is a homeless person who is asking for money at an event that is private. Amelia got up from the piano bench at that point in time. She gave free rein to her true nature for the first time that evening. The compliant posture was gone. It was replaced by an unwavering sense of self-respect, which caused a number of others in the room to flinch subconsciously. "You're right about one thing," Amelia responded with a voice that was both clear and resolute. "This evening, he should not be here." She paused, allowing the silence to fully permeate the space. "Next week, I am supposed to perform at Carnegie Hall in New York, so I should be there." The room became completely silent in a way that was terrifying. Victoria was aware of the floor moving beneath her feet. "My name is Amelia Washington," she continued, "and I am the youngest classical pianist in history to be admitted into the Juilliard School's Young Artists program. In addition, I hold the title of National Champion of Classical Piano for those under the age of 15. She took another pause, giving her time to digest the information she had just received. "I'm not here this evening because I'm in need of food or money. There is another motive for my presence. The many pieces of the puzzle were coming together in Dr. Chun's head, and he watched in awe as they formed a whole picture. He muttered, while pointing to the documentary is being created by you." Nodding, Amelia gave her assent. "That is correct. I am working with PBS on a documentary film about bias and access to the arts. The producer who works with me advised that I attend charity events for art education while posing as a young person without any resources in order to film how affluent people truly treat others whom they assume to be of a lower status." The room was rocked by the suddenness and impact of the revelation. All of the color left Victoria's face, leaving it completely pale. "Are you recording a video of us?" Amelia confirmed in a composed manner that there were cameras that were hidden. "Audio and video with high definition. Everything that has taken on here this evening will be recorded for broadcast across the nation." In an attempt to find cameras or any indication that this was a malicious practical joke, Victoria searched the area around her frantically. "That is against the law. It is illegal to film someone without their permission. Actually, you signed image releases when you came in." But Dr. Chun interrupted, his voice dripping with sinister satisfaction. "The fact that this event may be captured on film for documentary reasons is explicitly stated on the ticket." He broke into a smile that was rather pained. "There is no way that anyone could have read the fine print. I am certain of it." The throng started to move around. Individuals were anxiously whispering to one another, and some were even grabbing for their phones to check their tickets. Everyone could feel the profound terror that gripped the crowd. Amelia continued, paying little attention to the gathering commotion around her, by stating that the first portion of the documentary will examine the ways in which talent and promise are neglected when they are packaged in appearances that contradict privileged assumptions. The second portion will demonstrate how those who assert that they are advocates for the arts respond when they are presented with genuine art that originates from sources that are not expected. When she believed that there would be no repercussions, I just recorded her actual personality. Dr. Chun shown a great deal of deference when he approached Amelia. "Would you mind telling me what your plans are for this recording?" Amelia stated that the documentary would be broadcast on a national level the following month. "I have also started a YouTube channel where I offer abbreviated versions of these social experiments. My recent video, which was shot at an event in Boston, identical to the one I'm describing, has received approximately 2.5 million views, particularly from individuals who profess to be morally superior while also exhibiting the very prejudices they claim to be fighting. The truth of her situation came crashing down on Victoria, and the throng watched in a state of terror. Her harshness would be visible to millions of people in only a few days. From that point forward, his name would be inextricably linked to the type of prejudice and sense of superiority that she had exhibited so unequivocally. "Mrs. Sterling," Amelia began, speaking directly to the person who was organizing the event, "you have spent the entirety of this evening telling me that people like me do not deserve to be in places like this, and that we do not have the ability, talent, or right to participate in high culture." The entire hall fell silent because she raised her voice with such power. "The entire world will get the opportunity to witness just what your true nature is like tomorrow." Victoria made an attempt to speak, but she was unable to get the words out. The sheer scale of the disgrace that awaited her in public was simply too much for her to be able to handle. When Dr. Chun took a look around the room, she noticed that the other visitors were displaying frightened expressions on their faces. "How many other events have you captured on video?" "This is the 12th, Amelia responded. "And it is invariably the same group of people who claim to admire art and knowledge, but who promptly discard skill based only on appearances without giving it a second thought." For what would turn out to be the final time, she faced her with Victoria in her line of sight. "The difference between you and her, Mrs. Sterling, is that when I was genuinely homeless for a few months after my grandmother's death, I realized that money or status do not have anything to do with decency. It originates from the way that we treat other people when we believe that nobody is looking." The quiet in the hall was so thick that it was almost possible to hear it. Everyone who was in attendance was aware of the fact that his comments and acts that night would be evaluated by millions of people who did not know him, and the majority of them were also aware of the fact that there was no conceivable defense for what he had exhibited. As Amelia surreptitiously removed a small recording device that was secreted away inside her backpack, a question loomed in the air of the Continental Hotel. How many other individuals who were both privileged and prejudiced had discovered, after it was too late, that the young woman whom they had scorned had the ability to disclose her true nature to the entire world? 6 months later, Victoria Sterling observed the vehicle approaching Carnegie Hall from the window of his little apartment. Amelia Washington, who was now wearing a sophisticated performance gown, waved to the crowd before entering the theater, where she would make her debut as the youngest soloist of the season. The documentary titled Faces of Discrimination has become a worldwide sensation with more than 15 million views on YouTube alone. Victoria had become the national icon of aristocratic hypocrisy, losing not only her position in all philanthropic organizations, but also the respect of the upper class, which she treasured so greatly. The prejudiced former charity event organizer was the subject of a documentary that went viral. The headlines were still being read in local media after several weeks. Her luxury events company lost all of its significant clients, and he now worked as an assistant at a modest law practice, attempting to restore a reputation that may never fully recover. Meanwhile, Amelia's official mentor became Dr. Chun, who assisted her in navigating the world of professional classical music. Amelia was appointed as the official ambassador for the scholarship program that the Continental Hotel established for disadvantaged young musicians. This action was taken by the hotel in response to its embarrassment as a result of being exposed publicly. Amelia made a statement in her first national interview following the incident in which she said, "Music knows no color, social class, or zip codes." She is solely familiar with truth and passion. When you possess the two, there is nothing that can stand in your way. The documentary had an influence that went beyond the realm of amusement. Conservatories made changes to their admittance procedures. Music schools throughout the country established community outreach initiatives, and hundreds of talented young people from disadvantaged neighborhoods were provided with chances that had been unavailable to them in the past. Victoria finally grasped the most painful lesson of her life after she witnessed Amelia's success in the very place where she had attempted to disgrace her. Talent and dignity are qualities that money cannot purchase, that surnames cannot transmit, and that are most certainly not determined by the color of one's skin or the address of one's residence. The finest retribution that Amelia could exact from Victoria was to just leave her alone. It was in order to demonstrate that true brilliance transcends prejudice, and that sometimes the individuals we least expect are the ones who possess the most remarkable gifts. If this story of overcoming adversity resonated with him, he should subscribe to the channel to receive updates about further inspirational stories that demonstrate how genuine excellence always finds a way to prevail, no matter what hurdles may stand in its path.